Okay, so really quickly, I do want to say one more time, just a reminder that this class on healthy sexuality um, doesn't mean that we're going to have a theological educational class. So we're not going to pretend to be your pastors or your spiritual guides, but we are just going to teach educationally on the topic of healthy sexuality. One thing I wanted to make note of, and this is for everybody who's not here today, and sorry to say this again, but it's not our place as therapists to tell you what to believe, but it is our place to help you make sense of what you believe. So that's what this class is going to be about. We're not going to tell anyone in this class or listening to this class that anyone in their family or they themselves or their child is doing anything wrong or that they're parenting wrong. That's not what this class is about. This is just an opportunity for us to have really healthy discussion on the topic of healthy sexuality. So I'm going to start the video and then we'll go from there. Now that it's recorded, of course. All right, here we go.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Thompson. I'm a therapist, and today we're going to be talking about those tightly guarded issues like healthy sexuality and easy access pornography. Guys, pull up your chair, get yourself a cup of tea or a glass of wine, whatever you're comfortable with. Yes, this is a little bit uncomfortable of a topic, but we are going to give more information with less weird. Okay, so let's go. So, on the topic of healthy sexuality, part of what makes us human is that we have a sexuality. When we have to be, so that means we have to be able to talk to our kids about our sexuality. We talk about uncomfortable things with our kids all the time, and we train them in those uncomfortable things from very young. One thing that I'm going to be referring back to a lot during this session is the topic of poop. Okay, we absolutely have to talk about poop with our kids every now and then. It is uncomfortable, it is weird, but we have to. And normally there isn't as much of a stigma around that. We know that there are some places that we can talk about it, some places that we may not be able to talk about it. But if there's an issue or something that comes up, your kids usually know that they can come to you and ask questions about that. So that's kind of how we want to talk about the topic of sexuality. With potty training, for example, we're training that from a very young age where we have a lot of conversations about it over and over and over again. And every now and then, it's kind of just ingrained. We know that going to the bathroom is something that we do. We know that it's a weird, strange conversation, but we still talk about it. The same thing is true about things like sexuality and pornography, okay? Sexuality is a part of who your child is and who they'll become. Feeling comfortable with their sexuality and sexual identity is essential to your children having healthy development. That's how important this topic is. It's not something that we want to bury our head in the sand about. It's something that we need to be very intentional about making time for. Do you guys remember those books called Your Changing Body that maybe your parents would kind of lay out in the laundry room or in the bathroom and hope that you would stumble upon them, and that by stumbling upon that book, you'd read through the whole book and you wouldn't have any questions, and suddenly you'd just be a mature adult with a healthy, thriving sexuality? Do you remember those books? Those books are excellent. Those are excellent resources, those books. But they should be a supplement to what you're already teaching and walking through with your children. These books as resources and human growth and development classes in school should not be the leaders of this conversation in your home. You should be the leaders of the conversation in this home. And remember, you need to start these conversations young, just like that whole potty training idea. We started really young in the scheme of things. And it's still something that we continue to work through and talk through and sometimes have questions about or concerns about, right? Same thing. Start young and remember that you are leading the vibe of that conversation. So if you're having these conversations about healthy sexuality and how accessible pornography is, which we'll get into a little bit later more. If you are coming at these conversations from a place of embarrassment or humiliation or shame, or there's certain words that you can't say without shaking, or certain things that you're not willing to address or talk about, then what you're literally doing is psychologically training your child to hear and to know that there are certain things that he or she should be ashamed of, certain things that she or he should not ask you questions about, and that there are certain parts, very real, and in some cases, big parts of what make them who they are, that they should be embarrassed about and never talk about, right? That is not what we want. So when you're having these conversations, remember that you're leading the vibe of the conversation. They're going to pick up on your vibe. They're going to pick up on how you feel about these things. So think for a minute. How do you feel about your sexuality? Where are you with that? Do you have a thriving sexual experience with your spouse right now? Do you have pleasurable sex? Is that comfortable and easy for you? Are there parts of your body that you feel embarrassed of? Are there parts of your body that you're not willing to look at or address? Is sexuality and the fact that you are a sexual person, is that something that you feel ashamed or embarrassed to admit? Or maybe you're confused about it. So think about that. Check in with yourself. Where are you on the topic of your own sexuality? Because chances are, mama and dad, chances are, if you're struggling with that, if that's really not a healthy place for you, or if you have some confusion or shame there, chances are you're going to pass that down to your child. And I know, even though this is a very, strange thing to say, I know that you want those grandbabies from your kids one day. And I know that you know how they're going to get those grandbabies is through being in a healthy, respectful, loving marriage one day with just the best in law that you can imagine. And this is the weird part. I know that you want your child to have an excellent, healthy sex life one day. And whether you have that or don't have that, I know you want that for your child. And so, in order to have these conversations in a healthy way and to pass down an understanding of what healthy sexuality is, if you're not there yet, we got a counseling center and we got really good therapists and we can process through that with you. So get in touch with us if this is kind of bringing up some stuff, and we'll work on that with you. But you've got to consider where you're at and how you might potentially pass that down with your kids. How you guys feeling? Is that a little too close to home? Didn't know we were going to talk about you, huh? And guys, it's so important to remember that sexuality is not just about sex. So when we talk about healthy sexuality, that does not mean that the only thing we're talking about is that conversation about sex. It's not just about sex. The topic of, or the conversation around healthy sexuality is about how your child feels about their developing body, how your child makes healthy decisions and choices about their body, how your child understands and expresses feelings of intimacy, attraction, and affection for others, how your child develops and maintains respectful relationships. That's all part of developing a healthy sexuality. It's not just about sex in the future or anytime down the line. And you have to remember, guys, that you are your child's most important role model. So, how you feel about your developed body, how you make decisions and choices about how you take care of your body and how you love or don't love your body, or tend to it and listen to it or don't tend to it, how you express your feelings of intimacy, attraction, and affection, and how you maintain respectful relationships. They're looking at all of those things, whether you are sending direct messages or silent messages just through what you do and how you relate to yourself. They're picking up on all of those things, which is why my goodness, I can't state it enough that if you're struggling in this area, counseling would be an excellent step for you. You know, and we know that our kids are going to get information about sexuality from all different kinds of places, from their school, from classes in their school, from what they hear in the hallways, from their friends, from social media, from what they see in TV and video games and movies. My goodness, they're going to get all kinds of information from all kinds of different places. Talking to them openly will help them sort through all that information and make sure that they have the most accurate information, right? That's why you have to lead this conversation. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's an ongoing part of life. This is just part of being human, is that we have a sexuality. So even though they're getting all these different, pieces of information from all these different areas, remember that young people do trust the information that they get from their parents, even about sex and sexuality. Okay. So when we go back to that topic that you're sort of like, gosh, please don't talk about poop, don't say the word poop another time. Think about that for a minute, guys. The reason why I mention this is you, like I said, trained them to know where and how, and maybe even when and in what manner to go to the potty. You trained that from a very early age. It's not okay to go to the potty in the middle of a Walmart, right? There's a time and a place to handle that part of your body's functioning in a healthy way, right? Think about if your children were 16, 17, if they were a little bit older teens, and something were to go wrong or feel not quite right. They're having a hard time going to the bathroom, or they know that something is off. That is a weird and awkward topic, but most likely your kids know that they can come to you and mention that to you, and that you're going to take care of it, and that you're going to take it seriously. You're not going to shame them for not being able to poop for a couple of days, or you're going to shame them because it's a weird and awkward conversation. No, chances are they absolutely are going to say, Mom or Dad, this is weird, but I'm having an issue and I don't know what to do about it. And you might say, let's go to the doctor about it. Or you might say, let's read some things about it, or let's have a conversation about it. But in these healthy relationships, they're probably not going to keep it from you. They know that they can come to you, even though it's weird, right? So they do respect and value what you have to say on the topic of sex and sexuality, even though it might feel a little funny at times. Talking about sexuality will absolutely feel uncomfortable, but you can make it easier by trying a couple of things. For example, use everyday opportunities to talk about sexuality, even when they're young, guys. So, what they hear in music, or what they see in their favorite TV shows, or maybe what you heard their friends talking about, in the backyard when you kind of overheard what was going on. Use those opportunities to ask them questions. See things, or try to see things from your child's perspective. Ask them questions like, well, what are your thoughts about that? Or when you heard that, how did that make you feel? Or, things like that. Try to hear and understand your own child's perspective to get a better idea of where they're coming from. And be ready to talk about it when they're ready to talk about it, which means being intentional about these kinds of trainings, being intentional about sitting with yourself and getting a good idea of where you're at with your own sexuality and these topics. Those are all so important. You can't jump into this without having spent some of that intentional time with yourself. So be ready to talk about it and humanize them and yourself during the conversation. It's okay to say, listen, I know this is weird. I know that this is a little bit awkward, and that's okay. Humanize it for them. And make sure that they know how normal it is that they have these questions, or that they have these, ideas, or, curiosity. Be honest if you don't know the answer to something. So if they ask you something you really don't know, it is completely adult, completely responsible, professional to say, you know what? I don't actually know. Let me go and research it, or I'll ask, and I promise you I'll get back to you. But I don't know. I have to think about that. And then be an active listener. This is a really important skill for parents to have. When we have these conversations, these bigger conversations, and maybe really all conversations that we have with our teens who are humans, we want to be listening to hear their perspective and to really understand where they're coming from. We don't want to listen just to respond or just to lecture, right? We want to listen to get an idea of where they're at, where their head's at, where their emotions are at on these certain topics that can be a little bit uncomfortable at times. All right, guys, listen. It is completely normal for teens to try on new identities. It is completely normal for teens to be figuring out who they are and who they want to be. It's completely normal. Okay. And you know this already, because you know that one week your child wants to be an artist and a musician type, and maybe is dressing a certain way or doing their hair a certain way. And then the next month they want to be an athlete, and they want to eat a certain way and talk a certain way, right? They're figuring out who they are. They're going to try on new ideas. You might notice that your teen boy, even though he's expressing that he's having a developing sexuality, and you can tell that some of those things are changing. He might go from 1 week of not really saying much at all to the next month dabbling in what it feels like and what it sounds like to refer to women as hot, or to take an interest in what women do and how they dress and how they interact. That's okay. He's figuring out his identity, even his sexual identity. That's all right. That's very normal, very healthy. It's also really important to remember, and we've talked about this if you've been along with us in all these classes, that mood swings and thinking about sex a lot is extremely normal. And the mood swings and the horniness, if you will, is coming from the same hormones taking effect in your child's brain. Your son is, there's testosterone, a whole lot of testosterone. There's progesterone, there's estrogen, a whole lot, right? These are the sex hormones. It's what's literally changing their body to be able to create more humans and to have a sexual drive, to want to have sex, to want to create more humans. Do you see how normal that is and how good that is? So if you think about it, if you, for example, have a son who's super moody and kind of all over the place, and maybe this is new and you're not used to it, and you're hearing yourself saying, gosh, why is he so testy? He's so testy, right? Go, oh, well, testicles, testosterone, right? It's just the sex hormones that's kind of wreaking havoc on the teen brain right now. They get a bad rep, but my goodness, they're going through so much. So just remember, they're being testy because they got a lot of those sex hormones going on. The greatest thing you can do for your child's sexuality, guys, is to normalize that they have one. Okay, so let me say that one more time. The greatest thing you can do for your child's sexuality is to normalize that they have one. And our Christian audience, I'm talking to you mostly, okay? Your children who are being raised in the church, raised in the Lord, guys, they have a sexuality. And it's so important that they have a healthy one. And it's so important that once they're married, that they have a thriving, healthy, pleasurable sexuality. That's what we want for them. That's a really good thing. It's not something we want to shame out of them or scare them away from. So the best thing that we can do for their sexuality is to normalize that they have one, to make them feel normal for having one, not to make them feel ashamed or embarrassed for having one, okay? For example, I'm a therapist, guys. We're therapists here. We meet with clients who come in struggling with that very issue. They come in because they can't find pleasure in sex. They come in because they can't look at their naked bodies with any kind of love or acceptance because there's parts of their body that they're ashamed of. They are maybe in a season of dating. They haven't found a spouse yet, and they're really struggling with how to put themselves out there a little bit more to show a potential partner that they are wanting a romantic relationship with someone, because that was never bred in them, that it's okay to say that you want a romantic partner and you want all the things that come with that. And it's really hard if that was never a part of your education, right? So we just got to normalize it, especially in the church, that our kids are going to have a sexuality. So when should you start talking about sexuality? That's the question that we get a lot. You've already started. When your babies were infants, you started with soothing touches, with closeness, with showing them intimacy, with showing them respectful, loving relationships between you and them, between you and the other partner in that partnership who created this baby, hopefully, most likely. Right? You've started showing them what this looks like in a healthy way from infancy. You've already started, whether you realize that or not. When raising boys, guys, I'm raising a boy, you know how early they find their penises. Happens like that, right? They're in the bath or they're running around the hallway naked after a bath. They're curious about their bodies, and that's good. And the best thing that we can do when they find their penises, or when little girls find their other body parts, is to say, there it is. It belongs to you. That's right. That's what it is. Rather than to say, don't touch that. That's off limits, because you're going to breed very young into them that there are certain things that they are not allowed to love about who they are, certain things that they should think about only with shame, right? So instead, from a very early age, we want to say things like, that belongs to you. You're right. There it is. Things like that. Just greeting them, meeting the conversation without any shame or embarrassment. A little tip for just getting an understanding of maybe where they're at or where you're at with these conversations is take a look around your kid's bedroom right now. And specifically, I'm talking more so to the parents of teens. How are they decorating their bedroom? How are they displaying that their sexuality is blooming? What do they have on the wall? What do they listen to or watch, right? You can get an idea of the level of conversations you've had about these things. If you're seeing things and there was really no conversation about why it's up there, or you have concerns that maybe by seeing certain things or hearing your child talk in a certain way, they might be lacking an understanding of how to be respectful in these intimate relationships, or how to be loving and actually close and intimate in these intimate relationships that they'll one day have, right? So just take a look around their bedroom to get an idea of maybe where they're at with this development of who they are. Open up these conversations with them and give gentle corrections and gentle encouragements too. So if you're seeing certain things, bring it up just like it's any other conversation. And if something seems a little off, or maybe they're showing that they have information a little bit off, gently correct it in a kind and healthy way as their parent. Sexual curiosity is a normal part of adolescent development. Sexual curiosity, whether you are raised in the church or not. You have to remember that being sexually curious is normal, just like you're curious about all the different parts of who you are, of how the world has been created, of how things come to be. We want our kids to be curious. So being curious about sexuality or their sexuality is a normal part too. And as parents, our job is to be resources for our children as they grow into those sexual beings. So like I've said before, I'm pretty sure a couple minutes ago, don't bury your head in the sand. Don't pretend like because of the way that you're raising your child will never find porn, for example. Chances are, guys, they will stumble upon porn at some point, or it will find them. So they will find it, or it will find them. It'll be a pop-up that they click on accidentally. It'll be something they see in the background. It'll be someone will, a big brother or big sister will show a friend of your child at some point. This is just kind of all, we know that these things happen. So don't bury your head in the sand and say there's no way your child is going to experience this. Most likely they are. And in fact, we hear from teens that teens often use pornography to learn about sex because they're curious about sex. They're curious about this part that they're not quite so sure about, because everything is a little bit like I'm not quite so sure about who I'm becoming and what makes me me. So a lot of times kids or teens specifically will say they use pornography to find out what sex is. How does it work? How do you do it? And so being able to have conversations when maybe you find out that they've already looked at porn or something like that, being able to let them know that what they might potentially see in pornography is not realistic, and getting kind of specific about it too could be really helpful. Saying like, the size of sex organs that you see in pornography is not realistic. That's not what you should be expecting. That real life sex is actually messy. It's not perfect, and it doesn't look, glorified like it does in these videos. So if you happen to have stumbled upon this and have seen these images before, the most important thing to remember is that this is not real life, and that exposing yourself to these images can actually hurt your real life intimacy later, because your brain is going to get so accustomed to seeing certain things or wanting certain things or hearing certain things that what is actually real and beautiful and pleasurable and good suddenly isn't enough. Okay, so that's why we don't want to just put our head in the sand and say my kid won't access it. Probably they will. And we want to be able to build in them a resilience that if they do, they need to know certain things about what is true and what is not true. In fact, 40 to 50% of 11 to 13-year-olds report being exposed to pornography on the internet. 40 to 50%. Whether intentionally or accidentally, porn can have lasting effects on mental and sexual health and on their intimate relationships. And the People Pornography and Age Verification Survey found that while 75% of parents interviewed believed their children had not seen online porn, 53% of those kids reported that they had. Okay, so this is a serious thing. It's out there. It's accessible. It's really easily accessible. So when talking to your adolescent about porn, remember, don't lecture. Okay, what am I doing right here? I'm lecturing, yes, but I provided a resource that you decided would be good for you, that you wanted. You tuned in, you decided that this was going to be a good lecture for you. But what about if we were having dinner and I sat down with you and started lecturing at you, right? You would want to get me out the door because you didn't invite me into that space in that moment for me to do that. So don't lecture. Ask open-ended questions and really listen, like we talked about with active listening. Listen not to respond, listen to understand. And find teachable moments when you can bring up the topic of healthy sexuality or pornography in a non-judgmental way. So organic moments when you hear something or they say something, bring it up and don't be judgmental about it, and see where that conversation goes. Don't jump into a conversation specifically on pornography without educating yourself first, or before you've checked in with where you're at with the topic. How you feel about it, what you've maybe seen in the past, or your own exposures, or your own issues around the topic. Be aware of those things. Don't jump into it unless you've had this intentional time to think through it. And if not you, so if your teens are a little bit older and you're just now starting to have these conversations and it's just not going well, that's okay. If not you, it's all right if it's not you. Maybe it's an aunt or an uncle or an older cousin who your child does have a very good relationship with. Talk to the aunt or uncle or cousin and say, I could really use your help here because it's a conversation that needs to be had. And chances are, if their relationship really is that deep and really is that strong, that aunt or uncle or cousin probably wouldn't mind having some of those conversations. So if it's not you, don't take that personally. If it doesn't need to be you because of how you're bumping up against a wall, then it needs to be somebody who's safe, and ideally somebody that you know very well in the family. And no matter what happens, no matter what's brought up, stay calm, because when you stay calm, it shows your teens that they can approach you with these topics, kind of like poop. You're not going to freak out that something's going wrong with their bowels, right? It's going to be awkward, but you're going to talk about it. If you stay calm, then they know if something else comes up down the line, they can bring it up to you and talk to you about it. Assure them that it is perfectly normal to be curious about these things. If you were to discover, for example, that they've accessed porn, assure them that it's normal, and even apologize to them if you haven't talked about sex or about porn with them yet, because that evens out the playing field. And then make a plan for a more comfortable time to discuss what pornography is and how you would like them to think about it. So if you've discovered that they've accessed porn, approach the subject calmly, like we've talked about, but tell them that they're not in trouble, that you can discuss it at a different time, so you're not, no one feels attacked, or no one feels like, gosh, this is coming out of the blue and now we have to talk about it right now. Bring it up and say, this is a really important conversation. Why don't we schedule a time so you guys can both come into it feeling prepared for the little bit of the discomfort that the conversation is going to bring. Go slowly and practice what we call the 3 E's of effective discipline. And by discipline, I mean education. 3 E's of effective discipline: explore, explain, and empower. Explore, meaning ask questions to understand where they viewed it, what they saw, and how they felt. Explain, describe your concerns with the illicit content and ask them to share their own perspective. How do you think about this explicit content? What do you think how this might affect you in the future? Things like that. Get their perspective too. And then finally, empower. Invite them to develop solutions for making safe, healthy decisions in a way that you can both feel good about. Remember to minimize controlling techniques, because if you try to control them, when you're having these particular conversations, what tends to happen is they'll just push the behavior down. So the behavior won't go away, but they'll push it down and they'll know they can't bring it up to you. Or maybe even any safe person, which is really how addictions can form. So minimize controlling behavior and invite their perspective and their own ideas for how to keep themselves safe. Knowing how easily accessible porn can be, we want to focus on keeping them safe, duh. Like we don't want them to access it at all. We don't want them to see it at all. But it's actually more important to wrap your head around how you can help build resilience and safety after they most likely have access it somewhere. Okay, so we don't want to focus all of our attention on making sure that there's no environment that they could maybe access porn. It's just probably going to happen. What we want to focus more on is building resilience if it does. Communicating openly with your kids builds trust. And if they have trust in you, then they know that if something were to come up that feels unsafe or dangerous or scary or weird on the internet, that they can bring it to you and you guys can have a healthy discussion about it. And think about it, guys. If you're noticing that porn is showing up in your browsers very often, think about, are you guys going through something? Maybe you're in the middle of a divorce. Maybe you're in the middle of, my goodness, a global pandemic. And your son or daughter is really struggling with that. It could actually be that the uptick in pornography use, or in you kind of discovering that there's been pornography use, could be from other motivations, like coping with unpleasant emotions and negative thoughts. A lot of times our brain is designed to keep us safe. It's not designed to make us happy. And it could be that in the middle of a really, difficult, complicated situation, that they're just needing that little dopamine surge and they find that they can easily access it. So don't judge them and don't shame them for that, but know that maybe it does have something to do with a big situation that they're going through. And then if you need support answering kids' questions, there is actually a pretty amazing website called amaze.org/parents. Amaze, like amazing. amaze.org/parents. This is not, for our Christian viewers, this is not a Christian site. So I want to be very clear about that, but it is really helpful with wording and resources and all of that. So maybe take a look at that if you'd like a little bit more information. And then finally, hit the books, guys. It doesn't have to be a one and done thing. This is tricky and it's something that you're going to experience for a while. So remember, pornography today is totally different from pornography of the past in regards of the effects on a child's brain. And so there's a book called Your Brain on Porn, Internet Pornography and the Emerging Science of Addiction. This is written by former science teacher Gary Wilson, and it's an easy to read book on the topic. It offers hundreds of recovery stories and tips, along with advice on how to have those tricky conversations with your kids. So that's it. Take a sip, take a deep breath. We got through it. We did it together. And if at any time you want a little extra support, reach out to any of us here at Cumberland Counseling. You can go to cumberlandcenters.org. You can make an appointment. We can start counseling if that would be helpful, or we can even just set up a phone call and talk through some of these things if you'd like some more support. It was nice chatting with you today. Don't hurt me. I know this is a tough conversation. I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, guys. Okay. Everyone make it out alive? Yeah. All right. So feel free to unmute yourself, show us your face if you feel comfortable with that. We would love to dive into what questions came up, what thoughts came up, what feelings came up. Let's just dive in. Where are you guys at with this?
I think you did an excellent job of explaining it, Alexandra. I like this. It's a very important topic to talk about, and it's also, it shouldn't be done with shame or with even embarrassment or laughing as you talk about it. It's important. So you did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that that I think about a lot, and I even, talk about a lot with other counselors that I may supervise, um, is that like in the counseling room, that is a space that absolutely anyone can talk about anything, even the, you know, deepest, darkest, ugliest parts of yourself that can come out in that counseling room for both adults and for children and teens. And that's where it's supposed to come out. But could you imagine if you were sitting across from a therapist who couldn't say the word sexuality or masturbation or any of those things, couldn't say those things to you, or was a little giggly or a little like, you would not want to talk about anything on that subject with that therapist, because they're showing you that this doesn't feel safe or right in their body, that there's some level of shame around it for them, right? So that's where we're coming from this education from a therapist point of view, that when you sit down and have these conversations with your teens, just remember you're setting the stage for how comfortable the conversation is going to go. Show them that it is a completely normal part of life, by being normal about it. It's hard to do, but that's probably the best tip I could give you.
And it's never too late to make it normal if it wasn't normal the first go around. And to, like what Alex said, of asking yourself those questions. Why is this uncomfortable for me? And then reapproaching it. I think a lot of times we can think, oh, I had that conversation, it didn't go well, or it was kind of awkward, and now I'm nervous to bring it up again. And just to be, you just bringing that in the room, be like, hey, I know that this can maybe feels uncomfortable to talk about, but I want you to know that it's safe. And like, starting over and be like, I'm sorry for, you don't have to apologize. That doesn't feel warranted, but I just wanted to normalize, like, it's okay if it went really bad before and you want to try again. Don't feel like, oh, I've already missed the mark and it's too late. Because actually that shows your kids another level of, it's okay. I'm learning to, it's okay to be human and grow in these things, and doing that together can be just as powerful, if not more.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job too, Alex, and I liked how you emphasized how important it is that the children want to be able to come to their parents about this, not to somebody else. I mean, the parents are the most important givers of information, and you want them to feel like you said, that they're not going to be shamed, or that you can't come to me for anything.
Exactly. So I know you guys have some thoughts. I know your minds went down that rabbit trail, and I'm sure you're not the only one. Any questions on any of that?
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's just in general about, we do have a teen, she's 13, and how do you, we're very, what was the word? Everything, like we explain everything very open and just honest and truth. I believe in being truthful, and yes, these topics are hard. I'm just now introducing a lot of different things to her because, she's hit maturity, and at that stage of her life, I'm like, okay, God, now's the time. So I'm going through, this God's, it's called God's Design for Sex series. It's very good. And and I'm, just talking about it with her. Anyway, she's very receptive and open. There's nothing that's weird about it, which I appreciate. But I do know part of her personality, she's more inward, she's not very outspoken. And she's very receptive and, listens very well. But what are some ideas that you can say or maybe suggest to help get them to open up and not be so quiet to themselves? Because I know she may want to talk about things, and I feel like I do make it clear, and, and it's a safe environment, and I'm being very intentional making sure I'm calm and all those things that you're talking about. But I
Mhm.
still feel like maybe sometimes I have to spell the words out and pull it out to get her to talk, because she won't just say, well, what's this or what's that? It's just maybe part of her personality. How do you, I don't know, because like I don't know what she's thinking. So it's something I'm working on, and I don't know what to even say about
Mhm.
that, if that makes any sense. But she's fine. I don't feel like she's negative or depressed or anything like that. It's just I would like to hear her opinion or her thoughts on it. Like you said, those open-ended questions. Well, what was your perspective? What do you think? How do you feel about that? But I feel like sometimes she doesn't like to give me anything to chew on.
Yeah, I think all of the therapists in here that work with teens would say, we get it, girl. We've been there with the teens who, just don't have anything to give us to chew on. So first of all, what a beautiful example, like what a beautiful thing to hear that you are so intentional and so aware, and you're already having these conversations to the point where your child is most likely very comfortable to come to you with these things, or at least that you're coming to her to make sure that she's getting this information from you first. So like,
Yeah.
if I could like high five you all day.
Well,
Good.
thanks. That because I did not have that in my home. My mom was a single mom, and I don't even remember. I don't think I ever talked to her about me starting my menstrual cycle. She was
Yeah.
like, there was some pads under the sink there, and
Yeah.
figure it out pretty much, because her parents didn't talk about it, in her generation. So now me and my husband are like, we were kind of left on our own. So now that we have kids, I'm just kind of determined not to put my kids in that predicament, because I had to figure out everything on my own, and it's just not been good. So, and then now, having to overcome all those obstacles,
Mhm.
Later on in life, instead of being taught and walked through those situations. And I think that's why I am the way that I am.
Mm. See, I think people just like that are the heroes, the ones who see things that didn't go so well, and instead of repeating it, want to actually make huge and really difficult, challenging
Hmm.
changes. Like
Yeah.
you're the generational curse breakers. That's a big deal. But
Yeah.
just the one thing that came to my head as a idea of, to answer your question specifically,
Hmm.
sometimes for internal processors, I'm an
Hmm.
external processor, so I could
Hmm.
give an answer like that and I could
Yeah.
give the answer for an hour.
Hmm.
Not everyone is like that, and we can really respect that there are some people who are just internal processors and need
Hmm.
a lot of time to process before they actually know what they feel, what they think, and how to
Hmm.
respond. So to your comfort level, what came to my mind was the idea of setting aside like a sleepover out, like, again, to your comfort level, but my idea was like, get a hotel room with her, or
Yeah.
take a weekend trip away, and let her know
Hmm.
ahead of time that the
Hmm.
purpose for this particular trip is to give you guys an opportunity to talk through any and all things,
Hmm.
down to the bottom of the bucket of things that she's thinking about and wants to talk about with her mama or with a safe person. That's what
Hmm.
this weekend is about, and letting her have some time to process and get some questions together, maybe even write them down in a journal or something, will give her enough time to
Hmm.
look at the journal, ask the questions, and then be able to process out loud with you over a longer period of time.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good idea, because I've had those thoughts in my mind. I'm like, well, maybe I should just take a little weekend getaway, or do something where we just have that one-on-one quality time together, because we have two other kids as well, and it is hard to get that
Mhm.
that quality time together without any interruptions and things. So thank you. That's a good idea. I've had those thoughts a little bit, so that's kind of confirmation.
Awesome. That was a big idea. I don't know why that came to my idea, or that came to my mind. It could be go on a hike. It could be
Yeah, or
2
just a
hours,
day, just something. Yeah, just a one-on-one time, I've been thinking.
Yeah.
So
That you tell her in advance so she can prepare for it. Yeah.
yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Really good question. Any other questions like that?
This is Leon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hope everyone's doing well. A couple of things. One, being a father of 3 girls makes this whole conversation very unique.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll give Tony and I a little pat on the back because some of the stuff you were saying that we have been surprised with the girls getting exposed to different things. So it's kind of like one of those glances across the room. We're both like, all right, remain calm, but talk to them, make them feel comfortable that this is normal, so on and so forth. We're not perfect. We didn't get it all the way right, but I think the big thing that stood up to me is that it's not a one-time conversation. So we had to deal with the issue at hand at that moment. But what I got out of this is don't let it linger, follow through as they've gotten older. And but you mentioned, kind of like you were just speaking to the big idea of kind of getting that time away. Do you have any advice for dads and daughters on that topic?
Well, okay, so I realized no one else said anything. None of our other counselors said anything. So I want to like pause for a minute. And do any of our other counselors have ideas for daddies and daughters?
Is it that hard? I'm kidding.
I guess I can speak into it a little bit. It is that hard. But I think what's really helpful is like thinking about from a biblical and Christian worldview is like the father heart of God. Like he made us as men and women. And so he also, fathers us really well, even relating to our sexuality. And as we grow into, maturity in our bodies and in relationships. And so I think even just what helps like me in that role is thinking about fatherhood is like, how did God father me? Like, how does he relate to me in a way that's comfortable, in a way that's honoring, but also in a way that is just like, we can talk about these things together, even though like I'm a man, I'm your father, and you are a female as my daughter. I think can be a really special, unique place for you to speak, like identity and life over your daughter and relating around these issues, showing that a man can speak and relate to her over sexual things in a way that's like honoring and really shows her that she is important and like chosen and precious, and made in the image of God. Whereas maybe more of the specifics around like a menstrual cycle or something like that, it might be helpful for her to talk to her mom or like an older sister or someone else, kind of like Alex had mentioned, if that's helpful.
No, that's good. Appreciate that.
That's really good, Frank.
I was waiting out because I just knew Frank probably had something good to say. And I'll just add to that. I think too, and obviously this is for what each person's comfort level, but even sharing like how you would think about honoring a female sexually, and not being graphic, but just kind of like, this is what it means to honor a woman as a male. And I think that can also model for them what it would mean for them to be honored. And how they should be treated or how sexuality should be approached. So I don't know if I'm saying this clearly, but just the idea of you can really offer that perspective of modeling for them what they're worth and how they should be treated. And like, this is how some men can think about this. And this is how I, have learned or grown. And you don't have to be super personal, but just giving them that perspective as well, I think can be just so valuable. So that they're not being told by other guys, this is what it is, or this is what it isn't, when they've had, like Frank was saying, that powerful father figure really speaking that life into them in that way.
Perfect. Thank you.
I love that. And the image of when Jesus went and sat next to the woman at the well came to my mind. Not because of there being any correlation between, sinful acts and things like that, but the fact that Jesus did not shy away from having conversations with women about their sex lives. He was very clear and upfront about that. In my I don't actually remember if this is scriptural or if it's just in my imagination of the like story that I wrote. But I was going to say, I believe he sat down next to her and got close, like physically close to her, and had that conversation. So maybe it's not a weekend away to talk about their menstrual cycle, but surely there is physical closeness and gentleness and straightforwardness where you're showing that you're not afraid to talk about the very same topics, so that she can come to you to get one perspective from a man, and she can come to her mom to get the totally more precise perspective as a woman.
Right. Excellent advice. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, such good questions. Any last thoughts or questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to offer some advice to Leon as far as the daughter thing is concerned. To just always remember that little girls want to marry somebody like their dad. And it's not because you're perfect, but because they love you. And you're not going to always be right, but kids are so forgiving and they just want to know they can depend on you. And so you're establishing that foundation of safety for them to always know that you'll be there for them. And, take them out on a date and show them what it's like to be treated like a lady and like a woman, and to get dressed up and to just have fun with dad. It's priceless. My daughter feels the same way about her dad, and they do that sometimes too. Oh, and
Cool.
Butterfly Kisses. If you listen to that song from Bob Carlyle, I think it was, from years ago, such a great song. That will help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was very sweet. Very sweet. What's funny to me about this conversation is I thought that we were going to go down the rabbit hole of a lot of, the scary, hard questions and this conversation that seems to be kind of everywhere in our society these days. But I think there's a certain level when you instruct in a way that causes shame to disintegrate around you, the fear kind of disintegrates as well. So I feel like if that's the only thing that we can teach today, or the only thing that you remember today on this topic of healthy sexuality and pornography being everywhere, and these, scary topics popping up all over the place, if the only thing you walk away with is, how am I doing with this? And I will not shame my child, and I'll make myself available, and I'll sit down next to her at the well and, be direct and straightforward about sexuality in a way that is safe and honest and kind, then we'll be okay, regardless of whatever our kids have questions about, or whatever they're exposed to, or whatever they may struggle with or be curious about at some point. As long as we remember, shame doesn't belong there, because it'll stick there, it'll stay there, and then it could cause more problems later. Then I think we're going to be okay. So isn't that funny? All these, I was like, people are going to have so many thoughts and questions, and it was just didn't go in that direction. All right, well, love that, amen. Any last question before we go?
Not a question, but a comment. So these are some really great ideas. I'm taking notes as we speak here, and I picked up a lot of good things from you, Haley, and even you, Leon, Allie, and Alex. So thanks, guys, and for all your comments, and also how Frank shared about how it is to, how you talk to your daughter and how you treat your daughter, and that is communicating also because sexuality isn't just about sex, it's about interpersonal relationships and intimacy with another person.
Amen. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. If anyone is interested, because this is our last one, can you believe that? We love that you guys have joined us. This is our last one. If you would like any or all of the recordings, please email us. I think actually what I might do is just send all of them to everyone anyway. But if you have a question or want to get in touch with any of us, please do. Anytime. If counseling seems like a good idea for you or a loved one or your child, we are ready and excited really to be able to sit across from you guys. You can actually just go to our website, cumberlandcenters.org. If you'd like to get started in counseling, you can click on the little button that says make an appointment, and that gets you started right away. Or you can email us at counseling@cumberlandchurch.org or at Catherine Kessler at cumberlandchurch.org, or Catherine, is it counseling@gatecityatl.com. So if you're a Gate City member, it's counseling@gatecityatl.com, or if you're a Cumberland member, it's counseling@cumberlandchurch.org. Okay, well, you guys have a great evening. Reach out if you have anything else that comes up, and thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.